Hello, everyone. I wanted to welcome all of you for attending today's webinar. It is 11. We have quite a bit of information to share with you, so we will go ahead and get started. We want to thank you again for joining us today. I want to share some important reminders real quick before we get started. We are recording today's webinar and it will be made available to the public for viewing on demand. But by joining today's webinar, you automatically consent to the recording. And so if you don't wish that your voice be recorded, we just ask that you not speak during the webinar, and this would include the Q&A portion. All attendee microphones have been muted to eliminate any background noise. During the Q&A portion, we will unmute those microphones. We welcome your questions, and we ask that you include the questions in the chat box, and we will save all the questions until the end of the webinar during the Q&A portion. And so we're so glad that you've joined us for our special webinar topic, Entity ALR Establishment, where ALR stands for Authorized Legal Representative. Now, we created this webinar specifically for organizations and providers that serve as a Social Security Rep Payee, a legal guardian or a conservator, or a power of attorney for eligible individuals, in which we're going to share with you today how it is now easier for organizations and providers to open and manage multiple stable accounts through this Entity ALR establishment process. Your presenters for today's webinar include myself, Roxanne Clay. I'm with the West Virginia State Treasurer's Office, and I'm the director of the WVABLE Savings Program. And we also have Thomas Hatch, and Tom is the operations manager for Stable Account Program. He is an incredible asset to Stable and to WVABLE. And I just want to thank Tom again for taking time today to provide this valuable training. Now, during today's webinar, we're going to start off with a very brief and high-level overview of the WVABLE Savings Program. This will be followed by our special topic presentation, in which Tom will provide an overview of the Entity ALR enrollment process. That includes the form that is currently used to complete the enrollment. He'll provide a review of the methods for managing an entity accounts, and he will highlight the new reporting features available only to entity ALRs. And then we'll include time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with WVABLE, it is a savings and investment account program that allows individuals with disabilities to save and invest while protecting their eligibility for public benefit programs that includes SSI, Medicaid, SNAP, and HUD. Now, a quick tip, as I go through this intro, you're going to hear me say WVABLE, ABLE, and Stable. So essentially, they're all the same. WVABLE is West Virginia's ABLE plan. ABLE is referring to the federal legislation, and Stable refers to the name of the ABLE account. And then on this slide, you see a screenshot of WVABLE.com. So if you have an additional monitor or a smartphone, feel free to take a look. WVABLE.com website. I'll be referring to the site throughout my intro. The website is just, know that it's the main hub where everything takes place. It's also where you go to learn more about the information that I'm sharing with you during this program overview. You're also going to hear Tom and myself refer to the Resources tab, which is located here. No, this is the tab where all stable account forms are located. So what is WVABLE? It is West Virginia's ABLE plan, and it is based on federal legislation called the ABLE Act that was passed in 2014. So this bill created savings and investment accounts designed specifically for individuals with disabilities. Money that is deposited into this account does not affect eligibility for public benefit programs, including SSI, Medicaid, SNAP, and HUD. Now, our program in West Virginia launched in February of 2018, in which we celebrated our 5-year anniversary earlier this year. Know that WVABLE accounts provide financial independence for people with disabilities. The account is owned by the individual with a disability. The accounts provide new investment opportunities that they didn't have before. So individuals avoid the spend down of their funds in order to stay below that $2,000 asset limit that is set by Social Security and Medicaid. Individuals can now save for an emergency fund. They can save for the long term. WVABLE accounts also provide tax benefits. So just like a 529 education savings plan, so in West Virginia, that's the Smart 529 plan, the earnings from the investments grow tax-free. And the earnings remain tax-free as long as ABLE funds are spent on what's called qualified disability expenses. Now, new as of 2019, there is a West Virginia state income tax deduction for all contributions made to the WVABLE account by the West Virginia taxpayer and resident, and that is dollar for dollar. Know that WVABLE, it's offered to the West Virginia resident through a partnership with the Ohio STABLE program. That's where the term STABLE comes in. Ohio was the first state in the nation to develop their STABLE program back in 2016, and know that 13 states make up the STABLE account program. This includes Kentucky and also some close by states, Georgia and South Carolina. Now, since STABLE is a national plan, if the account beneficiary here in West Virginia were to move out of state, the plan will automatically follow them. So nothing will change about their account. They can still use their existing login and STABLE Visa debit card. So who is eligible? The requirements include that the individual is a West Virginia resident, and the onset of the disability would have had to have occurred prior to the age of 26. No, this doesn't mean the individual would have been required to be diagnosed before age 26, just as long as the onset of the symptoms occurred before the age of 26. Also, you don't have to open the account before the age of 26. The account can be opened at any age. And then we have one of the following criteria that's required. The individual is eligible or entitled to receive SSI or SSDI due to the disability or blindness. So no, this does not mean you have to be receiving SSI. In other words, it simply means that the individual has received a disability determination by Social Security Administration, or the individual has a condition on Social Security Administration's list of compassionate allowances conditions, or through what's called self-certification, which means you have a written diagnosis by a physician of a physical or a mental impairment that causes marked and severe functional limitations, and the condition has lasted or is expected to last for at least a year. So this is the same standard that Social Security uses for making disability determinations. And then a very important update to share, and that is the recent passage of the ABLE Age Adjustment Act. So beginning January 1 of 2026, individuals will be eligible for ABLE accounts if the onset of the disability occurred before the age of 46. So this is up from the current age requirement of 26. So let's talk about enrollment. Our standard enrollment to enroll an individual beneficiary is completed online. And then for Entity ALR enrollment, note that an online enrollment platform is coming soon. Now, enrollment starts at the home page of WVABLE.com website. You locate the Open an Account button. This takes you to a gateway page for Vestwell, who is our plan manager. This then leads you to Stable Account Plan enrollment page. So enrollment is relatively quick and easy. It can take 15 minutes. It can even take less than that. But no, there is a $25 minimum opening deposit that is required to open the account, and that actually creates the opening balance. So who completes the enrollment? So the Federal ABLE Act requires that the person opening the account be either the individual with a disability, we refer to them as the account holder, who is also the account beneficiary, or if the individual is not able to open and manage their own account, for example, if it's a child, or if it's an adult with a disability who is not able, they may not have the capacity, or they're not willing to, they want help. Then the ABLE Act allows for what's called an authorized legal representative, and we refer to that person as an ALR. And the ALR is defined by law as one of the following: an agent acting under a power of attorney. Now, no, this is limited to the WVABLE account. And then we have a legal guardian or a conservator that's been approved by the courts, a spouse, a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, and the Social Security Representative Payee. But be advised, for the individual that acts as an authorized legal representative, they will be formally assigned to the account and will be the only person allowed to transact on the account. Now, how do you fund your account? So there are several ways. Within the Stable online account platform, you can link a current checking or savings account and make transfers as needed via EFT. You can mail a check to Stable Program Manager, and we do have a check contribution form that is used to mail checks, and that form is located at the Resources tab of the WVABLE.com website. You can also set up direct deposit, where payroll earnings can be automatically deducted and deposited into the Stable account. And then an important new feature of Stable Program is you may set up direct deposit of Social Security benefit payments. Also, we have the gifting page, and this is an excellent tool that Stable has created that makes gift giving by family and friends quick and easy. As for the investment options, when a contribution is made into a Stable account, the beneficiary or the ALR, they will determine how those funds will be allocated across the investment options that are included in the plan. And as you can see on the slide, your investment options for WVABLE Stable accounts include first the bank safe option. This option is 100% FDIC insured, in which the principal is protected, just like a savings account. The earnings are very low, but you do have the opportunity for earnings. And then we have 4 Vanguard mutual fund options that range from conservative to aggressive. As for what the funds in an ABLE account can be used for, money in ABLE accounts are available for use at any time to pay for qualified disability expenses. The legislation has defined what qualifies as a disability-related expense, in that it must relate to the disability and it must maintain or improve the health, independence, or quality of life for the individual with a disability. So note that the legislation is very broad in the interpretation of what qualifies, so there's not a true list. For the purpose, they didn't want it to be restrictive. But what you see on the slide are some spending categories. So some examples of what falls within those categories would be food, for example, that falls under basic living expense. Of course, any housing and rent related expenses, as far as transportation, fees for using Uber. Bottom line, anything that benefits and supports the child or the adult with a disability. And I always like to suggest to folks, think of it in terms of what would not qualify. So buying gifts for others or giving the funds away. Note that when you spend from the account, we always advise to keep documentation and receipts for what the funds are used for. As for ways to make withdrawals and get money out of the account, no, there's no fee and there's no limit set on making withdrawals. If you have linked a current checking or savings account to make contributions, then you can also use the linked account to make withdrawals by simply transferring the money back from Stable back over to that linked checking or savings account. You can request Stable Program Manager to issue a check to a third party, to the account holder, or to the ALR. And then there's a Stable Visa debit card. These are a very convenient method of accessing the funds for the individual that plans to use the money in the account more frequently, for example, to pay for daily living expenses. Know that the cards function as a loadable prepaid debit card, so that the balance doesn't, or the funds using the Stable card doesn't pull from the balance of the Stable account. They don't come automatic. You do have to make a request to receive the card. And then some important numbers and considerations to keep in mind. There's a $25 minimum opening deposit to create the account. Again, this is not a fee. It simply creates the opening balance. And then how much does it cost to own a Stable account? The monthly maintenance fee is currently $3.25, and this is billed quarterly at $9.75. The asset-based fees on the investment options are between 0.19 and 0.33%, and this only applies to the earnings portion of the investments. The maximum annual standard contribution amount that's permitted into an ABLE account from any source is currently $17,000 for this 2023 calendar year. If the beneficiary is employed, then he or she may contribute an additional $13,590 of their employment earnings. Now, for the individual that receives SSI, it's important that they know that a WVABLE account balance that is over $100,000, that amount starts counting towards a $2,000 asset limit. As of 2019, there is a West Virginia state income tax deduction for contributions made to WVABLE account by the West Virginia taxpayer, and that is dollar for dollar. And then also, effective 2019, when the account beneficiary passes, West Virginia Medicaid will not file a claim against the WVABLE account for any medical expenses that were paid on behalf of the beneficiary. The only exception is if the expenses were paid for the individual over the age of 55 who is living in a nursing home or a community-based waiver program. And that is as per the West Virginia Estate Recovery. And so more information about that program is located on their website at wvrecovery.com. We reviewed a lot of information in a very short period of time, but for anyone that wants additional program information, we've included program resources at the WVABLE webpage that is located at the State Treasurer's website. And this is a screenshot of what that page looks like. Also know that WVABLE conducts monthly reoccurring webinars that are open to the public. So highly encourage anyone that hasn't recently participated in a webinar or the 1-hour presentations to invite you to participate. They are held the third Wednesday of each month at noon. And to register, you click the button down here for upcoming webinar events. Now I'd like to turn things over to Tom with the Ohio Stable. He will start out by beginning with the enrollment overview. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that he can begin sharing his. Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks, Roxanne. And thanks, everyone, for being on with us today. It's my privilege and pleasure to be with you. I thoroughly enjoy working with Roxanne and her team there. And we're even recently able to go to one of their board meetings, being so close in proximity to your state, your lovely state, by the way. But today we wanted to go over specifically this one feature, and that is how can we set up, establish, and prepare ourselves in a more efficient way to be able to manage multiple accounts. And we'll talk about that. I'm not going to be able to go over all the detail about how to manage an individual account, but how do we get set up underneath this structure to be able to manage multiple accounts. The place I thought we would start, first of all, is just a brief introduction as to why this is important. There's definitely, it simplifies the process of overseeing many accounts, and we'll define what many accounts means. In some cases, if you're managing half a dozen up to a dozen accounts, it may be easier to manage those under a circumstance of an individual. But if you're managing 50, 100, lots of accounts, definitely this structure can help and benefit to simplify how those are enrolled in, how those are managed, and definitely the reporting that we'll get to is going to be a super key feature as well. There can also be levels of oversight that can be accommodated at the organization's management, and we'll talk a little bit about what those are that can't be accomplished if you're just enrolling in these as an individual ALR. And then definitely the reporting and record keeping that are provided, which we will highlight later in this presentation, are super unique, but yet very handy for those that are enrolled in this structure. I thought then we would start with sort of what are some of the differences between if I set this up as an individual versus if I set this up as an entity. So as an individual, if you were to establish an account, you can add more beneficiaries or more account holders underneath your management at any point in time, and you can manage multiple people. So that's fine. But then as you start getting into large numbers of accounts, that might become a little bit more burdensome than managing it within this structure. And the other thing too that I wanted to mention, and we'll continue to mention throughout this seminar, is as an organization, if you ever wanted to to separate accounts and have multiple individuals managing subsections of accounts, depending on how you're structured, that can be accomplished under the entity structure, but cannot be accomplished under an individual structure. Next is, are you willing to register the account under your personal information? So if I am an employee of a company, I may be less than thrilled to be managing these accounts underneath my personal name and my personal Social Security number versus having it registered in the company, the organization's, the provider's name and tax identification number, and me just working with those as an employee of that company. So that registration piece can be very important for a number of people. And then I already sort of covered the last bullet point here, and that is we have a single management structure as an individual, whereas an entity, you could have multiple management structure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through and why that might be important for some organizations. So next, we're going to start with some definitions. So as we go through, and I'll take you page by page through the current application, I want you to understand some of these terms so that when we mention them in the application, we're not getting confused by what they mean. The first one is, what is an entity ALR according to our definition? Sometimes I'll refer to it as an organization, sometimes a provider. All of those are sort of all within this range. Not sure exactly 100% why we chose the term entity to begin with, and this is subject to change. We are actually discussing internally whether or not we might even change that title to an organizational ALR or something of that nature. But it's nothing more than an entity, an organization, a provider that has been given the authority to perform financial transactions on behalf of a qualified beneficiary. And Roxanne already kind of went over those qualifications for the beneficiaries in these types of accounts. So do you have, via any one of the three structures that was already mentioned, either a power of attorney, a guardianship order, or conservatorship, or as a rep payee, within those capacities, do you have the authority to perform financial transactions on behalf of this individual? If so, then this could be a structure that you could open up and utilize. The first part in this structure is going to be the controlling officer, and that's the employee at the organization or entity that has been formally authorized to make decisions on behalf of the entity and manage its operations. So this could be all the way to the top of like a president or CEO. It could be even a chief operating officer or a chief financial officer, or even farther down the management structure, but it needs to be somebody who has that authority for that organization or that entity to say, we're going to contractually obligate ourselves by giving our name and tax ID number and whatever to working within this structure. And whoever that is can be that in that controlling officer role. The controlling officer really doesn't do a lot other than being basically the signing authority for the application and giving authorization for this to happen. They can receive some types of reporting and be updated on things, but that's more of an internal procedure than it is a piece of the structure of this. Then you have two agents that will be asked to be set up during this process. You have a primary agent and a secondary agent. The primary agent is going to be the employee who has the day-to-day management responsibility for these accounts. They will have the online access, the username and the password to get in and use our online portal, which I will give you a brief view of later in the presentation, where they can access that for the beneficiaries and transact and grab reports and make contributions and withdrawals and all of that in the online system. So that's what the primary agent will do. We also have a structure where you have a backup. We call the backup the secondary agent, and they basically have all of the same capacities and abilities of the primary agent, except they don't have the online access. So the secondary agent would do everything over the phone. The way that the platform is currently structured is that we can only have a single username and password per structure or per account structure. And so the secondary agent, as mentioned, has all the same capacity that the primary agent does, except they would have to be done over the phone. The secondary, again, is looked more as a backup individual. If the primary is unavailable, maybe they've left the company, maybe they're out on leave, whatever, and you need the secondary to step in temporarily they can do that, and they can do that via phone. And then oftentimes it's also good to have that backup there so that if there is a transition in employment, then as they're getting the new primary set up, you still have somebody with an amount of access to these accounts in the interim. So those are the definitions that we'll use as we go through this application. The next thing that Roxanne had mentioned is where do we locate the application? As she mentioned, on the WVABLE.com website, you go to the resources tab in your header bar up there to the right. And if you scroll down to the very bottom of all of the forms will be the default screen that you'll come to. You go to the very bottom and there is a group called Entity Forms. And the very first form in that group is the Entity Authorized Legal Representative Establishment. So this is going to be the form that will need to be filled out in order to establish yourself as an Entity Authorized Legal Representative. The form contains 7 unique sections that are listed here, and we'll go through these one by one. So you have the entity that's being set up, the controlling officer, the beneficial owner, the agent acting in behalf of the entities, as we mentioned, verification of identities, reporting, and the signature page. So let's go through these one by one, and we'll talk a little bit more about what information is required. And in some cases, there may be nothing required in that section so that you can skip over that. So the very first spot is going to be the entity information. So this is where you're going to put your organization or provider or entity's name. And this is the important part here is it's a legal name, but the name as you want it to show up on reports or on statements. So as quarterly statements are produced for each of the beneficiary accounts, how do you want that titling to be for your particular company? You'll have the employee identification number there, and telephone number, address, other information about the organization. And this will be the primary registration on the account. So this is what everything goes back to when it comes to the account. This, by the way, for the addressing information here, this is going to be more of a physical address. It could be the mailing address, but doesn't have to be. There are separate mailing address options that you could have in case you were using a PO box or some other type of address to mail things to. But on this part, we would suggest the actual physical location of the organization. After that information is filled out, then we go to the controlling officer. So as mentioned, this is the individual that has the authority to establish this within the company. Now, I will mention here, because sometimes some people feel maybe uncomfortable when we go through this and then also the agent's information, which I'll get to shortly. It is asking for some personal information. And the personal information here is simply for our program manager, Vestwell, and the vendors that they use, namely Bank of New York Mellon, who does a lot of the paperwork and so forth in the background. This is just for identity verification purposes only. So in no way is the controlling officer nor the agent information ever used anywhere else within the accounts other than on the application to simply verify that indeed this person exists and they're real, and we've done our due diligence to make sure that this isn't just some fictitious thing. So it does ask for that information. I know sometimes people are a little bit squeamish about potentially putting this on there, but it is a requirement, and we do ask for that information. So here's where the controlling officer would put their personal information, suggesting that they now have the ability to open this on behalf of this organization. After the controlling officer, we have the beneficial owner information. And the beneficial owner is something that likely, in fact, I don't even think we have a single one within our program that has ever filled this out, likely going to skip over this part. What this essentially is if the company is in a structure such that it is owned by a very small number of people, probably more like a corporate structure where maybe there's one person that owns 100% of the company, or multiple people own, 25% or more of the company type of thing, then there is some information sought about the beneficial owner. You can read it here. Basically, if a single individual owns 25% or more share, if you will, of this particular company, then they ask for this information. But if it's a not-for-profit, if it's a governmental related organization, all of those are not going to have anything to do with this particular piece. And as mentioned, I have yet to see anybody fill this piece out and it be applicable to them. It is part of the form, so I wanted to mention it, but likely you're going to skip over all of the pages that deal with beneficial owner. Next, we go to the agents, and the agents are the very important piece, as previously mentioned. So you'll fill out information for the primary agent and for the secondary agent. Personal information, again, is asked here for identity verification purposes only. In no way, shape, or form is this information used anywhere else within the account, within the titling of the account, and so forth. Just simply wanting to make sure that these individuals are under that circumstance. I will mention that we do have a little bit of an exception process to this, that if it's a government-related organization, then at times we have been willing to accept photo IDs, like an employee ID with maybe an employee ID number on it as verification, rather than this personal information here. Those would have to be, like scanned in and sent across and so forth. But and then the other final thing that I'll mention here as well on this, that could be an exciting forthcoming feature. Unfortunately, I can't tout it as something available yet, but as we are working on moving this process from paper to an online system, we are also looking at an additional step within that where the controlling officer can essentially name who those agents are, sort of under an indemnification or a form where they're stating that these are the authorized people within our company, and that we'll make that available as an option to do so that these agents don't have to give out personal information, but the controlling officer can verify for us that these are the individuals designated within that organization to do this. So more to come on that. We are working on ways to make this even easier to use and easier to process. And do understand that one of the reasons why we tout this is, meaning the entity structure, is so that people don't have to give out personal information. So we're working as best we can towards that, because sometimes that can be uncomfortable. But I can't stress more than anything that this information, though requested at this point, has nothing to do with anything else on the account, will never show up anywhere on report statements or anything, just simply for a verification in this step only. The next is verification of identity. I won't go over this a lot, other than knowing that there are other documentation that are asked for. This is just simply to make sure that we understand that the company, the organization, the not-for-profit, whatever, that they are a real company. Some of this also may be reduced over time as we implement an online system where some of that stuff can be searched for through public Nexus, Lexis, and other types of systems. But this is, again, just for the ability to say, we know that you're legitimate and we want to move forward with this structure. The next is reporting. So this one I will get to a little bit more in a minute. This was our previous one where if you wanted to receive emailed monthly reports, you would fill this out. This is largely no longer applicable, as all the reporting has now moved online, and I will be demonstrating that for you. So on this page, I would say if you're filling out the paper application now, go ahead and skip this page and don't fill anything out, because everything that they could send you on a monthly basis, have access to on demand. And so it's even better than waiting until the end of the month and getting stuff emailed to you. So I would skip this page if you're filling out this form anytime within the next couple months. And then the final one is the signature page, where the controlling officer at the beginning of the application will sign and date it, send it in. The very first page of the application, by the way, on the right-hand side has multiple methods at which you can submit the application. You can mail it, you can fax it, and so forth. I will say that if you do have availability of a fax machine, that particular method is likely the fastest. Because as the number that's listed is used, it goes directly into an electronic queue of our system for them to get access to that much more quickly, and then be able to expedite looking over it and seeing and making sure that everything is in order. So that's the way that we would recommend it. But if you want to send it through mail, totally legitimate way of doing it. just subject to being a little bit longer due to the time that it may take to get there through the mail. And all that mailing instructions is on that first page of the application. So once that application is filled out, there's also another piece that we need to chat about real quick. So if you are somebody considering on doing this and you have never opened up a stable account, an ABLE account, anything within this program before in the past, then the one thing that we would ask is that you need to fill out two forms. So not only the Entity Authorized Legal Representative Establishment Form, but also a new account form. So that's the bottom form on the list that's highlighted by the red arrow here. So this is the new account for the first account holder or beneficiary that you're going to start managing. And the reason why that's important is that when we get the entity structure established, you can't really log in and start using it until we have an account there for you to start managing. And so if you've never established any, you need to also send in an account form either together with the form preferably or very soon thereafter so that they can get the establishment set up along with the very first account set up. All of this process, by the way, as previously mentioned, is looking at migrating to an online system. I can tell you for you're one of the first groups to ever hear this, so you know, you get the first hearing here that particular process. I had the chance myself just this week to view where they are in the implementation of this and the design. It's looking great. They still have some tweaks and things to make, but at this point in time, it is anticipated, keeping our fingers crossed, that will be implemented by either the end of this calendar year or very early into next year. So with that, I will say that when that's implemented, not only will you be able to set up the entity via the same exact criteria that was just mentioned on the paper form, but do it online, but you can also establish that first account online as well through the same process. So you can do both of these on the same process, and that would be super handy. My recommendation at this point, though, is if you think this is something beneficial that you need to get set up before the end of the year, maybe you have some accounts that you really need to start setting up, maybe some funds you need to get in those accounts before the end of the year and so forth, then I probably wouldn't wait. I know the online is likely to be more user-friendly than maybe the paper form, but if you really need to get it set up now, the paper form is what we have. If you do have some flexibility, then maybe you wait until the online system is out there and available, and then jump onto that system and set it up that way. I will also put a plug in for the newsletter that Roxanne does there through your program. That's a good way to hear and be up to date on some of these features that are being developed. And so, you know, if you haven't subscribed to that, I would, because anytime any of these new features come out, she's going to highlight those in the newsletter, and then you can hear about those, especially in this case, when that online version of this is released. The other portion of this that I would say is that if you are currently managing existing account holders' accounts and you are considering now migrating or moving to this structure, like I've been doing these under my personal name, but I think it'd be better if I did these under the company or organization or entity's name, then you don't need to fill out a new account form. Just simply fill out the Entity Authorized Establishment Form. And then once that form is complete and accepted and implemented, then we can work with you to migrate all of your existing accounts under that structure so that you'll be able to see them all within that flow, rather than needing to establish that first account just to be able to see it. So we can move all the existing ones under there, and that becomes a much easier process. Next, a little bit about managing your accounts and some of the reporting features. So one of the things that I wanted to point out, which was implemented not too long ago, but I think is a really nice feature, and this is available to anybody who's managing multiple accounts, but especially if you're managing a large number, is the search and sort feature. So when you first log in, the very opening screen that you get to is the dashboard. And you'll see that kind of up in the upper left corner, kind of grayed because it's behind the scenes here. And the dashboard will show you every single individual account that you're managing under your login. They'll have the account number, the beneficiary's name, you know, the date it was created, the balance, a variety of pieces of information. frankly, what you do is you click on whichever one of those accounts you want, and that will take you into the management screen, which we'll show you in the next slide. But if you have a lot that you're managing, it's like, how do I find the one beneficiary account that I actually want to go into and make transactions on? So the search and sort feature is a great one to have, where you can search by last name, by first name, by account number. You can sort it, by date created, by any number of, by account number, so forth, any number of parameters to be able to more easily find the account that you want. And we're grateful that feature is there, because it's really helped out a lot of those that have many accounts that they're trying to keep track of. Remember this dashboard screen, because we're going to be referencing this a few more times here shortly. But from the dashboard screen, as I mentioned, if you have an individual account that's listed there and you want to be able to transact or do more information on the account, you just simply click on it. So like up here, if this were out of the way, I could click on the account and it would take me into what I call the overview page and the management portal. So this is what the overview and management looks like for each individual account once you get in. It's going to have, the plan name at the top with their name and a truncated account number. You're going to have all these different tiles and nice tiles in the middle that show you account balances, how much they've contributed this year, and how much not only how much they've contributed, but how that relates to the maximum amount that they can contribute. You can set goals. You can see the investments that are structured, what investment choices have been made, rates of return on those investments over the period that they've had the account. Roxanne referenced the gifting page right here. This is where you'd go to set up the gifting page. And this is where you can go to also apply for a card. Now, you don't actually apply for the card here. This link on this page will take you out to our card vendor, and you would do the application on their page, but it's a reminder that you have access to that feature. And then up here at the top, you have all of these different drop downs. We don't have the time today to go through all of these comprehensively, but that's where you're going to go to make contributions, make withdrawals, get quarterly reports, get tax forms, change settings. All of that stuff is done here. I will mention, by the way, that Roxanne and I have discussed, and we've done these presentations before, that if you're interested in wanting to go through a walkthrough of this management portal and all the different features to get a better feel for how that operates, we can certainly put together a presentation to do that. So you may want to reach out to her directly, maybe put a post in the comment if that's something that you're interested in. So that's what the management looks like. And once you get in there and start working with it, I think it's pretty easy and intuitive and a nice system to use. Now, as we head back to the dashboard, this is also something I wanted to highlight as far as the ease of adding additional accounts once you've put yourself in this particular structure. So once you have at least one account that you're managing, when you go into this dashboard, at the right of the dashboard, in this case, we have the name Kelly. There will be sort of this person-looking icon, and then the name of the organization or whoever is registered under that account. When you click on that, you get this drop down that has the 4 options: profile, add account, help, and sign out. For the add account, this is where you would go to add an additional account that you want to add. And the nice thing about it is that once you add an account this way, it foregoes any of the information in the application about the authorized legal representative, because it already knows all of that. And it just takes you to, I think it's literally 4 different screens where you're only putting in the beneficiary information. Obviously, their demographic information, their disability type, what type of communication preferences you have, and so forth. So it's a very streamlined, very quick, very easy process to add an additional account. And then once it's added, as Roxanne had mentioned earlier, it will need to be funded with that minimum $25 deposit for it to kind of be what we call active and up and running and going. And that can be done via check, that can be done via electronic funds transfer, and so forth. But I just wanted to show you this is how easy it is to add additional accounts once you've got the first one established and gone into the system. Next, on the same dashboard, we previously mentioned that you have this search and sort feature, and now currently live on the system as of probably a couple weeks ago. Underneath that search icon, you now have this link that is download entity reports. So this has replaced any previous reporting feature that we have. If there's anyone listening that is structured as an entity ALR and is currently receiving the emailed monthly reports, you can still receive those, but I'll tell you that this system is much better and you're going to want to use this instead, and I'll highlight that here. So once you click on that link, it will take you to this particular screen that's going to give you 3 types of reports that you can get access to: account activity, account balances, and account setup in process. So you click on which one. I'll go through these one at a time. So under account reports, and under the first one, which is your account activity. So your account activity can be looked at over different periods of time. You can put a date certain, which is your beginning date and your ending date of what the activity that you want to see, or you can actually click the little button down below, a little square down below where it's all account activity. So if you wanted to get ambitious and download the activity historically for every account all the time, you could go ahead and click on that and it will give you everything. I think most people are probably going to go use the time from and to get it for a certain period of time. You can use either one. Once you click on select those options and then click download, down below here, it gives you a little bit of a view as to what that report's going to look like. It's going to be an Excel file, and you're going to have different categories on this file, such as your account number, your a description of what the expense or contribution was, the date that it happened, the dollar amount, and so forth. So this makes it super easy within the organization if you're doing any kind of internal reconciliation to want to see what activity has happened, and then do I think that activity comes together and reconciles to the balance in the account or things like that. This is one that is really important for entities to understand. And again, all of these reporting features are only available if you are under this particular kind of structure. An individual will not see the option to run these kind of reports. So after account balances and activity here, actually after account activity, we go to account balances. And this one just gives you a balance of every single account that you are managing. Now, a couple great things about this, but first, before I talk about that, one quick caveat, and that is, if you understand how investment products work, especially mutual funds are priced at the end of each day. So the value on those aren't really seen until a report on the next day. So the one thing I'll tell you is, for example, if you wanted the values of your accounts as of October 31st, yesterday, you would want to run the report today, because that report would show you the values as of yesterday. There's a disclaimer that if you click on the little plus sign here, that will go down and explain all of that to you. I verbally explained it to you. So just keep in mind that these values are always a day behind whatever day you run the report, but they are available at will. You could run these daily if you wanted to. You can run them monthly, you can run them quarterly, you can run them annually, whatever intervals you want, you can run them. And another great thing about this report that kind of replaces something we had in the previous reports is, in giving you all the balances of all those accounts, you can sort it because it's in an Excel file. You can also see what accounts you have that have $0 balances, right? So either accounts that you didn't realize, like, oops, maybe somehow we spent all the funds, or that's one that I thought we had put funds into, but it's showing $0, and maybe you need to reconcile that. Is there still a contribution pending, or did the contribution not get applied? Whatever. So this is a great and handy report to use to verify that information. And then the final one that we will highlight is account setup and process. So this is one that individuals have asked us for. Sometimes they will send in the form and it's currently being worked on, or it's been accepted for a new account, but they haven't sent the funds in, or they send in a check and the check's in process. So this will give you any accounts that are currently in process but haven't been finalized yet, in case you wanted to see those. And sometimes we've had organizations that may be applying for 20, 30, 40 accounts at a time, and they can't keep track of where they are in process, which ones have finalized, which ones haven't. So this will at least give you a report of which ones have not finalized, and that you may want to do some follow-up on. Again, downloaded into an Excel file underneath the information that's shown here. So that's our reporting feature. We're super happy to have it. We're always willing to take suggestions. So for those of you that are out there using it, definitely give us any feedback or suggestions on if you want other options, how it's working for you, things like that. But so far, all the comments that we've received have been super positive about this. The final thing that we're going to do before we go to question and answer here in just a second is just to give a brief kind of summary again. So one of the reasons why we encourage groups, companies, organizations, entities to do this is to streamline not only their ability to open and manage multiple accounts, but the other thing I wanted to mention was if you are structured as an organization where maybe you want multiple people, multiple employees to manage accounts. I'll give you an example in our particular state of a provider that's large enough where they cross multiple counties in our state. And they wanted it structured to where they have a representative per county managing account holders' accounts in those counties. So we can do that within this structure. And essentially what you would do is set up the structure, and then you would have multiple primary agents. So you'd have one primary agent for this county, one primary agent for that county, and so forth. And those individuals would have login access only to that subset of accounts for that particular county. Now, when you run reports through the system, and there's some other reporting features that we can get from our program manager, they can give you consolidated reports of everything. But in this particular case, you can separate it that way so that you can have multiple primary agents that are managing these subsections of accounts. Maybe a consideration if you're a larger organization that wants to subdivide responsibilities and duties that way. One other final thing is for the secondary agent role, the one that has the phone-in authorization, if you do have multiple primary agents, you can have one secondary agent that is the same for all of them. So that kind of backs up all of them. You can name separate secondary agents if you want, but you can have one that backs up all the primary agents if you want to structure it that way as well. So a lot of information here, not only about the accounts that Roxanne had mentioned, but also this entity process that I just mentioned. We are going to go to a question and answer section here. Roxanne can open up the microphones in case anybody wants to ask a verbal question. I don't see any to the best of my viewing at this point in the chat unless I've missed something. But we would definitely encourage any particular questions in the time that we have, and certainly can take more online afterwards. So after this recording has been put out, if you rewatch it and then have some questions that come up afterwards, Roxanne's available. I can be made available for sure to go ahead and deal with those at any point in time.
Thank you, Tom. Lots of really important and great information. I did unmute the microphones. So if I did that correctly, then everybody should have access to their microphones to be able to verbally ask questions. Also, feel free to enter questions in the chat if you would choose to do so that way. As we're talking about questions and answers, I will tell you that a copy of this PowerPoint will be emailed to all folks that registered for this webinar. And once the recording is complete and ready to and have made public on our YouTube station with the State Treasurer's Office, I will email that link to all registered attendees as well. So now you'll have both of those resources available to you. I'll also mention there may be a couple folks on this webinar who attended a very similar training that Tom and I did a couple years ago. That is when the ALR categories changed and was expanded to not just include power of attorney, guardian, conservator, and parent, but then all the additional individuals that you heard me mention before, including the Social Security Rep Payee. So WVABLE Act was then updated to include all of those, which again, we wanted to make sure all folks knew at that time. The training today is just an updated version of that training. And so we do have someone that raised their hand. Brandy.
Hello. So in going through this webinar, it showed like the list of people that should be opening up these ABLE accounts, and Representative Payee was like last on the list. So if one of our payees beneficiaries has like a legal guardian, should the legal guardian be opening up this ABLE account, or does it matter?
Tom, do you want to take that?
Sure. No, thanks for that question, Brandy. So one of the things that is unique about how the Internal Revenue Service implemented that rule is they did list that, and the list that was shown was in a list of priority. What that priority means is that anybody at the top of the list, which the first one I believe is power of attorney, and then you have the guardian, conservator, and so forth, does have sort of first right, if you will, to open those if they want to. They don't have to, but generally speaking, what is requested or what is suggested is that in this case, we'll use the representative payee as the example, since they're the bottom one on the list, that if the representative payee is going to open this account, then sort of to the best of their ability, are they aware of anybody else on that list above them who would want to do it instead? That doesn't mean they have to contact every single one on, of those categories on the list and say, do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? Do you want to do it before they do it? But do they have a reasonable understanding that nobody else on that particular list wants to do it? All of them are authorized to do it. It's just a matter of that priority. So in the case that you brought up, if the guardian wanted to manage that account, then the guardian does have that first priority over a representative.
Okay, thank you.
So as long as you've done some reasonable due diligence and feel comfortable with it, but many times it usually plays itself out pretty easily when understanding what the options are and who has the desire to potentially want to open and manage it. And oftentimes, even if there is a guardianship, they may defer to the representative payee since they're already dealing with their SSI funds and other kinds of stuff anyways.
Brandy, that was a good question. Does anyone else have any questions?
This is Jean Meeks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jean.
Okay. I opened an account for one of our individuals. I work for Rest Care. And the issue we're having is they have what they call FMRS accounts, and we cannot link a checking account to that. So they shut it down because they wanted me to finish filling it out online, and I couldn't because I couldn't link a checking account. So they shut it down. I went in, they opened it back up. They said for 90 days. We sent a check to open it, which opened it. So can we not just continue to send a check without linking it to a checking account?
Absolutely. Yeah, linking a checking account is optional. It doesn't have to be funded that way, and you don't have to have a linked checking account to operate. It can all be done via paper check if that's what you choose to do. Absolutely.
Okay, the lady pretty much told me they would shut it back down if I didn't link the checking account.
No, that would be incorrect information. If you happen to have a reference as to who that was, I would like to know.
I don't.
No.
I'm sorry.
If you don't have a linked, we have many accounts that do not have linked checking or savings accounts. That is totally fine. They can still function and operate. The one thing that may happen is if the account balance gets down to a $0 balance and stays there for over 12 months, there may be some communication that asks if the person's still going to use their account, and if not, they may close it. And when I say close, it's just they mark it as inactive. They never officially ever close an account to where it's wiped off the system. So if anybody ever wanted to come back in and reestablish the account, just re-log in and so forth, that is all part of the process.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jean, I'm glad that you brought that piece up because there are some, confusions where folks think they have to link a current checking or savings account because the system kind of prompts them to do that, but they do not have to do that they can certainly choose to mail in a check for that initial contribution amount and then for every contribution thereafter. Again, the check contribution form that's located at the resources tab of the WVABLE.com website is what they would use to submit with that check. And the address for SABLE Program Manager is included on the check contribution form as well. Do we have any additional questions? So let's say once we get off this webinar and you think of a question, feel free to email wvable@wvsto.com, and then I'm happy to share those questions with Tom, and then we will certainly get back with you with a response. Tom is sharing with you the slide that will show you where the webinar recording will be posted. Once the recording is made available, just know that all on-demand webinars are actually posted at that page. That is actually also the page that you went to register for today's webinar. I will also be emailing the links to all the folks that registered for this special webinar topic. The screen that Tom is showing you now is how to reach our customer service. And the information at the right is my contact information for WVABLE at the West Virginia State Treasurer's Office. 304-340-5050 is my WVABLE phone number that comes directly to me. And then all emails sent to WVABLE@WVSTO.com also come directly to myself. Then the information there at the left, the stable customer service, the 1-800 number. Anytime you see the 1-800 number, that's always to stable customer service. Know that they manage the customer service lines for 13 total states. So it's not just West Virginia folks that are calling in. So if you have questions specific for West Virginia plan, you're going to reach out to myself at the State Treasurer's Office. We included 2 different email. So for Entity ALR enrollment inquiries only. So you're completing the Entity ALR form, or you submitted the form and you're wanting to know what the status is. The email that's included is who you would reach out to. For once the Entity ALR has been established and you're functioning as an Entity ALR, you're logging in, you're accessing your accounts, you're adding new accounts, and you have the questions, then you would email team@stableaccount.com. So Tom, did you have any additional insights that you wanted to add to that piece?
No, not really. I just, re-emphasis on those email accounts. Definitely, we have the one, if you have questions about the application or and so forth, definitely email that. But for general inquiries, use the team at stable account. But our customer service are always there, willing to help. But we are also here as well. So, I know Roxanne probably feels very similar to that I do. And, if you're working through customer service and you're feeling some frustration or something isn't going right, please reach out to us. We have direct links, obviously, to Vestwell and their whole management structure and system there, and can help expedite things if things aren't going quite the way that they should. So keep us in mind as well. We would encourage you to use customer service first. Use us as a backup, but if something is still not going quite right, don't hesitate to reach out to us as well.
Yeah, it's not uncommon that folks will reach out to WVABLE, and of course, don't mind that at all. Actually, it can be quite helpful because then I learn what issues or circumstances are happening amongst our users, and then it helps to give me insights so that I can help potentially mitigate those with other folks in, moving forward. And Tom is always my first line of contact with Ohio Stable when mitigating anything along those lines too. And then, as mentioned, we do have the contact at Vestwell that Tom actually communicates with quite frequently. So, but yeah, any additional questions? So we're at 12:03. Unless we have any more questions, we will go ahead and close. But I just wanted to, number one, thank everyone that joined us today. We hope that you found the information to be helpful as it relates to just providing that initial overview of the program. And number one, if you haven't participated in a full presentation, highly recommend that you jump on one of the recurring webinars, because there's a lot more information that I include there that I would feel comfortable with you attending, so I can make sure that you're grasping all of that. And then, of course, all the information that Tom provided on the Entity ALR Establishment Process. And just, it's really exciting to be able to, that he was able to share the piece about the new reporting features in which you can generate your own reports. That's super exciting. Stable and Vestwell, they're always looking at ways to enhance the features for folks that are managing these accounts, and especially at the entity level. So we feel fortunate to be part of Stable. And thank you, Tom, for always your willingness to hop on these webinars and to share your expertise and your time. It's really, really appreciated. And so I'm looking at the chat. So thank you, got the questions I needed answered, and thank you. So yeah, so Tom, again, thank you so much. And for anyone that wants special topic webinars, the management of the accounts, even for anyone that's on this call that might, be interested, not necessarily in the Entity ALR, which that's the whole intentions of this webinar training, but that would like a walkthrough for this standard enrollment, we would be willing to provide that training as well. So, so again, thank you. And I don't see any additional questions. So Tom, do you have any closing statements that you'd like to share before we end today's webinar?
No, I just appreciate being on. Hopefully you found this information helpful and useful for this particular topic. And then I will reiterate one more time what Roxanne mentioned. We can do a variety of one-off topics of any various numbers of things, walking through how the online enrollment progresses, how the account management is functions, and so forth. So please give us your feedbacks, your comments on that as well. We'd love to get out as much information and make these as usable and as friendly as possible. Any other kind of general feedback you have about your experience with the accounts are also super helpful as well when you get in and you're working with them and managing them, because it is our goal to make these the most usable and easy to use accounts out there. We think it's going pretty well, but we don't use them day to day like you do. And so any feedback you have is wonderful. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks again, Tom. Thanks again, everyone, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day and week. And again, email us if you have additional questions or with additional training requests. We're happy to help. Thank you.